Hey there guys, I just wanted to do a quick video concerning the Pastoral Epistles series and just take a few minutes to explain a broad overview of major takeaways, things that I learned. And so the first thing I want to mention that you'll get from the introduction to these three books is that for the most part, something I found quite confusing is this new concept of what I would call an Apostolic Delegate. Or in other words, to put it plainly, Titus and Timothy weren't your run-of-the-mill pastors. They were more like secondary apostles under the tutorship of Paul. And so ecclesiology, the understanding of church governance and structure, I don't really have a box for that. And I find myself looking at passages like Ephesians 4:11 and studying things like church history, which I need to do a lot more work on to understand how those things were sorted out, along with things like the bishop overseer in contrast to the presbyters, elders, pastors. So I would say one key takeaway there is that has been greatly muddied for me, and I'm not sure where I would land on that. Although I do see something there. There's something there that we can clearly see. Another thing that I would point out that I kind of knew was there and was made abundantly clear, and it's that the New Testament model for pastor is always plural. There's always plural pastors. We always see that. Now, as I just mentioned, we may have one that oversees other pastors, but as far as there being a single pastor model, it's nowhere to be found in the New Testament. In most churches, in many churches, that's the model, and I don't see that reflected in the scriptures, and that should cause us some concern and should give us some things to think through about that. Concerning elders and deacons, I think my positions remain pretty much clear, although I found the qualifications and parameters around that extremely helpful and clarified. Along with that, what I would say concerning 1 Timothy chapter 6 is I found it very profound, the amount of warning that's given alongside money in the life of a Christian, and some deep theological teachings concerning contentment and concerning money. And that's 1 Timothy chapter 6. That really has rocked my world and changed my mind and my heart. In the book of Titus, I would say God's command to Christians, or Paul's command to Titus for his believers concerning being content and fruitful in any circumstance, including slavery, was very profound and really caused me to think of the centrality of the gospel within the Christian life. And any circumstance reminds me of St. Patrick selling himself into slavery for the faith. But I digress. Lastly, for 2 Timothy, I was reminded in the biblical call to share in suffering, which is throughout the New Testament, which we don't always see as an essential part of following Christ as a 21st century American. We may see that as for another context, another place, another time. But that's really not the biblical calling of a Christian to fit in and be comfortable. Lastly, I would say that Paul's teaching on the sinful anthropology of mankind also struck me as very important for understanding the last days, the last times, concerning the way human sin will flourish and the way things will be, especially in regards to, as he covers in 2 Timothy chapter 3, the sins that we find in the last days of the church. The last days have been going on for now 2,000 years, but the itching ears of people who attend church has never ceased. It only grows, and the false teaching, really, which is another major takeaway from the Pastoral Epistles, is false teachers and false teaching. It comes up in just about every chapter, and it's very profoundly important that we understand that as the church is being bombarded and overtaken by so many false teachers and so much greed. And so that's really struck out to me. Other than that, the last thing I'll mention is a key takeaway of the early church is that it was much more fast-paced in their spread, and seemingly much more family-oriented, and that it was much more of a family unit than maybe we would understand in many circumstances as American Christians. And so I think some of that has been lost. There's much more work I have to do in understanding the church, its nature, its function, its purpose. But as far as what the scriptures have to say in the pastoral epistles, I found many things that are central to God's heart and to the heart of Paul in these churches that are no longer either central or in many churches even a concept on their radar for what's important. And I found that very troubling. And I think it'd be worth a look to understand your church and how it functions and works. If you're a part of a church, is a biblical command. But along with that, not only to understand your church and how it functions, that you're called to be a part of some local church, but also to understand God's desires that he lists clearly for his church.